I have to admit I had an idea last week of what I wanted to preach about this week, but then something very momentous took place in my life that kind of rocked me spiritually, emotionally, even psychologically for some time, and I had to drop everything and just preach on that. So what was that thing that happened? I went to see Dune Part 2, and I couldn't think of anything since. So I think Dune actually is going to go down as one of the greatest trilogies of our times. I mean, even though Paul dies at the end of the second one, we've all seen it, right? No, I'm joking. All right, maybe I'm joking. I don't know. You'll have to go see it. We'll find out. I'm not going to give anything away about the movie itself, but it's going to go down as a great epic story, to say the least. And that's one word that I think has come up a lot when I've heard about this film as a trilogy. It's a great epic story, up there with Lord of the Rings, Godfather, Dumb and Dumber, all that. It's right at the top. But it made me ask the question, though, what makes a story epic when we say that? Like what's the difference between a regular story and an epic story? And the word epic itself comes from the Greek epikos. And epikos just means poem, right, or narration, or story. And so it's just like a word defining itself. But what epic actually means is that it's a story that contains all of the most essential characteristics that makes a great story to the full. So that they just do everything every other story does, but it's fully encapsulated and expressed in the best possible way. And so I wanted to explore, and that goes from like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, King Arthur, Divine Comedy, all those kinds. So what are these essential elements that makes a great story? And we are, our brains, we can go watch a 3-hour movie and the time passes if the story is good enough. We can read books on end or watch Netflix because we're addicted to stories. So it's really important to ask the question, well, what makes a good story, and what are we actually being attracted to? What's it telling us about ourselves? So essential elements of any great epic. Number one, the hero is a person of great stature, right? So he usually has to complete tasks that nobody else can do. He's an individual of great courage and valor, and in some ways they say he always is either partly divine or he must be protected by the gods. Like there's some divine element that guides this person's journey. And also every epic goes through vast settings. It never takes place in just one spot. Right? So you're going across geographies, or you're going across space and even times and into the underworld. Almost every great epic of history, there's an element of traveling into the land of the dead. So across all times and space. And because they're longer, they're usually common trilogies, they're longer stories, what it enables us to do is really enter into who this person is, who they began as, and what becomes of them as they go through their battles. And this is my favorite thing I learned about what makes an epic, is the primary component of an epic is that it doesn't highlight so much the struggles between good and evil outside, but all of the struggles that the individual character goes through is there to highlight their interior drama. What's happening inside of themselves, the good and the evil that is within their own heart, struggling for dominion. So it's who do you become in the midst of the struggles that you face on the outside? So these are all external battles, but the primary drama is within. Like, will Frodo actually throw the ring into the fires of doom? Will Bruce Wayne overcome his past traumas, right, and actually hold to his moral code that separates himself from the bad guys? And will Paul Atreides choose humility and love, or will he start the new great religious war and avenge his father? So every character struggles in that. And the other great thing about an epic is that nothing is guaranteed. There's no such thing as like every great epic story has a happy ending. Every single one is unique, and it's based, this ending, whether it's a victory, which we call a comedy. A comedy is something that has a happy ending in literature. Or if it's a tragedy, it usually ends with a funeral, a sad ending. And every great epic has its own ending. There's no guarantee that it always works out in the end, right? That's Godfather, trilogy, Michael Corleone. The very beginning, you see a man who he's distancing himself from his family, doesn't want anything to do with who his father is, the mafia, and yet by the end it's a tragedy because through fate and through his free will, he's caught up into the drama and actually becomes worse than his father. Lord of the Rings, Frodo, by the end it's a victory, right? Because by the end he's actually able to get the ring into the fires of doom and Middle Earth is saved. And of course Dune is a victory because there's nothing more epic than starting a new religious war, right? Anyone want another Crusades? I mean, that would be interesting for our time. But why I was thinking about all this, this came from the readings, all right? It's not like I was studying Dune and thought I would preach on the Gospel of Dune this week. I was thinking about that in light of the readings that we had today, because everything that we see, especially in the first reading and in the Gospel, is in place of a large story, right? So the Israelites, just in one reading, that first reading, says how they were all in Jerusalem, but they lost their fidelity to God. They stopped following the commandments. They were no longer worshiping Him. They became like everybody else around. So what's the punishment for that? Exile. They lose the place as the chosen people. And they go into exile in Babylon. And God says for 70 years, you're going to have to suffer. And now you're not going to have the external environment to protect you. You're going away from your home and for a great amount of time. And now the struggle's within you. You have to see that you're not like these other people. And you're either going to sacrifice who you are to become like them, or you're going to rediscover the purpose of your relationship with me in that place and be faithful to me. And then I'll restore you back to your land. And all of that takes place in the first reading. It's a great epic, and Israel is representative of that people that as a collective goes through that. And then Jesus in the gospel, He places our life, not only in this world, but in the life to come, in the means of a great drama that we're all a part of. Whoever believes in Him, He's in the midst of an epic drama between sin and grace, between light and darkness, and belief and doubt. When He says, whoever believes in the Son will not be condemned, but whoever does not believe has already been condemned. And this is the verdict. The light came into the world, but the people preferred darkness to light because their works were evil. I was just I gave a class right before this on confession. The hardest thing it is to do is to go to confession. It feels so good after you've done it, but you have to expose your works to the light. You have to stand before God, before another human instrument as a priest, and confess your sins. That's very hard to do. And many people prefer to stay in the darkness rather than to step into the confession, come into the light, and receive that healing mercy. But that's a drama that we're all in, expressed in our own souls, in our own hearts, in our own actions on a daily basis. The reason that we're so attracted to epic stories, to dramatic stories, is because that's our life. And I think we know that intuitively, that we're all in the midst of a great drama, a story that we're writing every single day with the decisions that we make, for good and for bad. And one thing to really ask yourself, this thought hit me, someone said it, and it was before I was called to be a priest. And when I was called to be a priest, it came back to me that if your life was a movie, was a story written, would anyone want to watch it? Would it inspire other people? Are you living in your drama and actually living an intentional life, right? And the greatest thing about an epic is there's so many ebbs and flows. It's not like you start in one place and you just keep getting better and better. There's high points and there are low points. And some people are at a really good place in their life right now. Thanks be to God. But that can change. right? It's like even me as a priest, I can be a faithful priest for 20 years and end my life walking away or denying Christ. That's a drama that is alive every day. And married couples know this, right? It's not like you get married and then you're on autopilot. It's usually the opposite, right? You get married and you have to even be more intentional with how you're living that, because it's easy to just drift away. But the beautiful thing about a story is that everyone goes through difficult moments. Everyone has their failures. And maybe you're at that point, but you don't have to stay there. You can continue to rewrite your story. As long as we're alive, our story is continuing. We're like wet cement. We can paint everything we want, we can erase it, and we can start again. That's the gift of life. But if that's true, I think the greatest danger in our life is to not live our story, and to check out. And I think that's the main thing the devil, the world, and our own flesh wants to do, is just to sedate us. I think there's two great heresies, and I've spoken about this over some times, but again, it just comes back to me every time I think about the real message of the gospel and the consequences of the gospel. Is that I think the two greatest heresies of our time are sola fide, Protestant origin, of just all you have to do is say, I believe in Jesus Christ, and you're saved. Why? Because then it just deletes everything that you do for the rest of your life. You are no longer in the drama. You're no longer in the adventure, because all you had to do is say, I believe in the Son of God, and then I'm saved. And I think people are attracted to that because there's no more consequence that I have to worry about. It's no longer about what I do and what I don't do. I'm guaranteed the victory at the end. I don't think that's true to life. I definitely don't think that's true to the story of Israel. And the same thing about universal salvation, which is something that has more of a Catholic origin from it. That in the end, no matter what happens, we're all going to go to heaven and then. Well, what does it matter what we do now? Why struggle? Why suffer? Why go through the difficulties of change if in the end we're all going to go to heaven and it's a victory just for being alive? I think it takes away the most fundamental drive that we have as human beings that causes us to watch so many stories for hours on end and get lost in them, to see that drama being played out in other people's lives. But to not recognize that that same drama is in my life right now, being written every single day. You're losing the greatest aspect of what it means to be alive. That there's no greater story than the story of your own life in Jesus Christ. That's the most personal story that we have. And that's a story that's going to be written for all eternity, according to what we do on earth. Part of the reason I don't like it is I had a couple escapes this week besides Dune, which is like a 4-hour movie, so that's definitely an escape. But then one of the days I was really tired at night, so one of the guys introduced me to Modern Warfare, Call of Duty. I'm not a gamer much, but that's a fun game. And I was so bad at it because it was on realistic mode, and so I'd get shot in the head within 2 minutes of starting the game. And I did that for like 20 minutes, just getting one part, get hit one time with one bullet, and then died. I'm like, well, this isn't fun. I'm gonna change the difficulty. So I put it on the easiest mode. And I'd be literally walking and 10 guys just shooting me at the same time, and it's like red screen, you should move, but I'm still not dying, and then it's just one shot, and I'm just walking through the whole game, winning everything, right? And it was awesome because I was actually moving forward, and I was winning, but you lose the excitement of the game, right? It's hard to feel good about yourself when you realize no bullet can actually kill you. You're just kind of going through unharmed, right? And that's we lose interest in things that don't challenge us. That's why even relationships, they've done so many studies on this. If relationships have too many problems, then it tends to lead towards separation. But the same is true on the opposite end. If there's not enough difficulties in your relationship, it also leads to a breakup. Right? Because, and you would think that's crazy. Like, isn't that what we all want? Like a blissful love? No. We want something that's a challenge. Because we're made for a challenge. Right? And Laetare Sunday, what we celebrate today, is it's looking at wherever I'm at right now with my Lent. We're a little bit of halfway through, a little more than that. And if it's been difficult, we should be thinking that we're getting closer to the end. We're getting closer to Easter. And that should be a great joy for us. I don't know about you, but this has been a hard Lent for me. But this is also one of the reasons I'm so happy that we're actually getting close to the end of it. And I've had so many Lents in my life where I've made it to Easter Sunday and it almost didn't even feel like a change. Because what I was giving up or what I was doing wasn't even really on my radar. This place is going to be so packed with people on Easter Sunday. Thanks be to God, they're at least coming then. But they are not going to really appreciate the joys and the victory of Easter in their own life if they haven't been here through all of Lent and had to endure my 20-minute homilies over and over again. I mean, you guys are doing it, all right? And this is going to be a 30-minute homily, so this is even better. You'll be looking forward to even more. We need the cross in our life. We need suffering. We need the failures to appreciate the resurrection, to appreciate what Easter actually offers us. And that's where our joy comes from. You cannot have joy without the suffering along the way. And lastly, we need to understand the most important thing is that Jesus is the only story that gives sense to our life. And it's Jesus' story that we are meant to enter into. Because it's not up to us alone, like these great epic figures, to define our own existence. Jesus Christ has already gone before us as the greatest hero of reality. The reason his story encapsulates every single thing that an epic story that we tell in these other ways reflect only in little ways. The reason his is the full encapsulation of it is because it's an actual reflection of reality. It's not just a story that somebody made up in a corner in a dark room. It's actually the reality of life. That God, the Son of God, who is the highest, descended across time, into our time, and even into death, into hell, to liberate us who was enslaved to the devil and eternal separation from God. There is no greater story than God, the sinless one, dying for us who are sinful and separated from God. And that's what St. Paul is talking about. God, who is rich in mercy because of the great love he has for us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, brought us to life in Christ, raised us up with him, and has seated us with him in Christ in heaven. That Jesus is the one who goes before us, who fights the battle for us, and gives us the grace to enter into it. And if we recognize that and live our life in union with him, to enter in that same struggle, to endure our crosses and walk through our desert, and whatever difficulties we might be facing in our life or in this Lent, if we persevere through his grace to the other side, then we too will experience the gift of his resurrection come Easter. And that is the source of our deepest joy.